coming out with, Pride T-shirts and things like that. You're going to get a lot of detractors, but you have to worry about your brand too. So Jim Cornette is now a figurehead of MLW. So that makes your company look pretty bad, especially because all the other companies are doing their best, like I said, to go the other way. Jim Cornette is who Jim Cornette is. I respect Jim Cornette's contributions to the business, but I think he was off the mark and somewhat out of line on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to your point of, if, in terms of saying it in the year 2019, I think, if you're going to come out and make a comment or make comments like that, you have to just expect or anticipate some level of backlash, whether that's from fans or wrestlers or whatever it is. Now, beyond that, right, the MLW show, as you mentioned, where that particular incident happened where Callihan spit the water at Cornette, the main event, which was Callihan versus Mance Warner, was basically a loser leaves MLW match, which Callihan lost on television. So another part of the story that I read was, whether that was truly an exit for Callihan from MLW or if it was an angle. So there was a story that said that it was supposed to be part of an angle where he was going to not be at the next set of tapings, and then he was going to come back under a mask at the following set of tapings.
Very similar to the Midnight Rider, I believe.
Something along those lines. So that was apparently a potential plan. However, part of the story is that in this match with Mance Warner that they had in Milwaukee, which is basically a hardcore brawl. If you or any folks out there have not yet watched it, I guess Callihan did some damage to the arena that cost MLW a certain amount of money that was significant, and their officials were not happy with him over that and decided not to bring him back in general overall. Now, again, if that's part of the angle, if that's a legit shoot and he's not coming back, I guess time will tell on that. And there's two different parts of stories that I've heard, which is one that, Cornette was not part of the reason why Callihan is not coming back. And then, another part of the story where Callihan seems to think that Cornette is a reason why he's not coming back because of whatever role he has in MLW. So I don't know yet really what's true there. I will say if Callihan did damage to the arena during that match, then that's a little bit careless on his part. I'm not sure how tied into MLW he was in terms of returning, but he was a pretty main figure on the show, at least since I've been watching it the last few months. So that's the other half of it, I guess, is Callihan now officially gone from MLW for good? And if so, what role Cornette may have played in that?
Listen, I like MLW. I watch MLW every single week, and they're worried about, if true, they're worried about Sami Callihan damaging the arena. That's one thing. They just sent out a press release 4 days ago that Savio Vega is coming to MLW New York City. Savio Vega covered for Invader, who killed Bruiser Brody. Savio Vega knows who killed Bruiser Brody. Savio Vega employs the guy that killed Bruiser Brody. You're worried about something. How about the fact that you're about to employ a murderer or a co-conspirator to murderer? Savio Vega makes me sick, and anybody that hires him for their company also makes me sick. So they've got other things they should deal with. However, I will say that this summer, Tony Schiavone is going to be commentating on several MLW events. So I would assume his commentary, he'll be taking over for Jim Cornette. If Jim Cornette's not going to be there on some of them, I don't know. But I do love the move of them getting Tony Schiavone back in business. And as far as Sami Callihan, Sami Callihan is no stranger to what's the word I'm looking for here, Joe?
Controversy?
Thank you. He is no stranger to controversy. He had a beef with Austin Aries and all the stuff he's done. He killed Eddie Edwards with a baseball bat and Jim Cornette. That's really where this started. Jim Cornette, Sami Callihan everybody knows he crushed Eddie Edwards' face. And then he made an angle out of it, and he's been calling himself The Draw ever since. Jim Cornette had a problem with that, and they kind of started beefing on Twitter or Instagram, whatever it was back then. So I think it's kind of just developed from there. But I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I mean, I don't. Speaking freely, if I don't picture either Jim Cornette or Sami Callihan being easy to work with, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a huge fan of Sami Callihan. I'm not a huge fan of that particular style of wrestling. And Cornette makes that known on air when he commentates on his matches, rooting against Callihan and kind of saying that some of the things that occurred in that match are not really pro wrestling. But there are people out there who like that style, so I respect that. It's and I respect those guys for working that style. It's just not my thing. But he's kind of made a name for himself and being a little controversial. Obviously, his stuff that he did with WWE and NXT, and then he left there, went back to the Indies. So, listen, I'm sure he's going to have plenty of places to work. He's still in Impact, I believe. So if he's not coming back to MLW, then I'm sure they're going to be okay. And maybe if he does, then maybe this is all just an elaborate angle to get people talking, and eventually he will be back, and they'll turn it into something even more newsworthy. So I think either way, Callahan's going to be okay, and if Cornette sticks with MLW, I mean, they're going to be just fine in terms of where they are at too.
I just find it funny that Jim Cornette says that Joey Ryan and Sami Callihan, that's not wrestling. Meanwhile, him trying to rip a tuxedo off of Paul E. Dangerously and all the stuff that he did in the 80s gets a pass. It's like, well, you're stripping another man on TV. So where does the wrestling / sports entertainment draw the line? I guess, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones or whatever they say. But, like I said, it's a new day and age, and people are trying new ways to entertain people. I think Sami Callihan's quote was, I'm going to butcher the quotes, I'm just going to paraphrase it, something along the lines of, Jim Cornette doesn't think that's wrestling, but you have an undead zombie shooting lasers out of his eyes, and that's okay, referring to The Undertaker. So, sometimes I think some people might take themselves too seriously and, kind of play the blame game here and there. But either way, like you said, both of those people, they're both going to be fine. I'm sure Cornette's probably close to a millionaire, and Sami Callihan can go wherever he wants and make money. So that's that. I'll be interested to see where it goes. And I'm going to continue to watch MLW. I watch MLW every week. You know why? Because it's free on YouTube. So kudos to MLW for giving me a free product every single week. Can't complain about free wrestling, Joe.
No, sir, you cannot. Speaking
of free wrestling, it's going to lead us to our next segment. God, we sound official when we say that, buddy. We sound official. We're going to talk about our match of the week, previous week, match of the week that actually already happened. To me, I guess it was last week, the match that stuck out to me the most was Joey Janela versus Chris Statlander from Beyond Wrestling on Uncharted Territory. I think it was the 12th, whatever it was, last Wednesday. I don't know if anybody's got a chance to see that match. If you have independentwrestling.tv, Uncharted Territory from Beyond Wrestling is a great show every week. And Janela and Chris Statlander had one hell of a match. It was just north of 30 minutes long. And, Joey Janela said it wasn't a great intergender pro wrestling match. It was a great wrestling match. And I agree with you. Chris Statlander, a friend of the All Night Long Wrestling podcast. She was on the show a couple of months back. She's been doing some amazing, amazing things since the show. I mean, listen, she's only been in the business maybe 3 or 4 years, and I think she's moving on to a feud with Kimber Lee. So for me, the match of the week last week was Joey Janela and Chris Statlander.
So I don't really know what week or what days contained or within the range of me being able to pick the match of the week because I'm a moron. But of the shows that I watched this past week, and I did not get to see Uncharted Territory, and we're not going to talk about that on air for reasons that I don't want to get into. The match that I thought that stood out to me was from that MLW episode that I was just talking about. The opener was Flamita versus Rey Horus. I apologize for my Lucha Libre fans out there for my pronunciations, but that was the opener on that episode. And I thought that was probably the best match that I saw this particular week, in terms of what I've seen, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, ROH.
Oh, you haven't watched Raw and SmackDown.
Okay, I've watched Raw, but I read about SmackDown. And
better than me.
MLW, ROH, NXT. That was most of what I watched this week. And that's the match that stood out to me. NXT had a solid 6-man tag at the end of their show, but I don't really think it kind of, reached that level where I could say it was the best match of the week. ROH had a 4-way at the end of their show this week, which again I thought was solid, but nothing spectacular. But that Flamita Rey Horus match was one that that stood out to me. So that'll get my vote for match of the week this week.
I did not get a chance to see it, but based upon your recommendation, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna give it a shot. Joe, in the week coming up, the next couple of days, what to watch for? What are we watching for this week? One match.
I don't. Well, I think next week, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that on NXT next week, it's Shayna Baszler versus Io Shirai in a steel cage.
Yep, that is the main event of NXT next week. Yes, sir.
So that would probably get my vote, unless you're a big fan of Stomping Grounds this Sunday, which I'm not really sure there's anything on that show that I can really recommend. Maybe Samoa Joe and Ricochet. That's really all I can.
You're gonna jack my what to watch for?
No, I said maybe on that show. I mean, is that if you were to pick a match in the next week, or what to watch in the next week, what stands out? What stands out to you?
It was Samoa Joe and Ricochet, Joe.
Oh, that's what. Now that's on what show?
It's on Stomping Grounds.
Stomping Grounds on Sunday. And is there a title on the line for that?
I don't know, Joe. Now I'm just mad.
Why?
You chose your what to watch for, and then you doo-dooed on mine.
I didn't know that was yours, though. We didn't. Well, that's the thing.
Samoa Joe and Ricochet. Let's just not get into anything else. But Samoa Joe and Ricochet are two phenomenal performers. Ricochet might be one of the best in the world right now. Joe, a little bit older. I'm not going to say he's in the downswing of his career, but he's definitely a different type of performer than Ricochet, and I think he's going to be able to. You didn't just call Samoa Joe fat, did you?
I didn't say a word.
Okay. Just making sure. I think Ricochet is going to make him look even better than he is, and I think that should be a really good match. Ricochet doing the flip. Listen, so each week, one of us is going to have our own little segment, and the other one's going to have to respond to it. Next week, it's going to be Shooting with the Stallion. This week, it's going to be the Enforcer's Hot Take, Joe. So, we're going to close out this episode of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast with a hot take from me. You ready for this? You ready for my hot take of the week?
I'm literally on the edge of my seat.
I've been watching a lot of 80s wrestling, shockingly. And I'm going to tell you this. One of the most overrated tag teams of all time, the Legion of Doom. They were two very big guys that were not very good in the ring. And if they didn't have Iron Man by Black Sabbath as entrance music, there's no shot they would have gotten over as well as they did. So for this week's hot take from this guy, Legion of Doom, overrated.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one, buddy. Listen. I know some people and even some wrestlers out there like to call the Road Warriors, one of, if not the greatest tag teams of all time. I do agree with your point about their in-ring work, for sure. A lot of their matches, especially back then, that I've seen involves a lot of no selling. And things of that nature. They did have a cool finisher, I think, especially for that time with the Doomsday Device. But I think your point about their in-ring quality is fair, is accurate. They were very over, though, I think, with their gimmick.
Huge.
So, it depends on how, I guess, you qualify teams as being, where they rate overall in terms of, the tag teams in history, and whether that's whether you put more emphasis on in-ring or gimmick or whatever. It depends on where you would rank them. I mean, if you asked me who I thought the best tag team of all time was, I would not pick them. I think there's several other teams that are better than them. But
all right, several tag teams that are better than them. I'm going to give you 5 tag teams right now, and you tell me if you rank them above or below Legion of Doom. You ready?
I'm ready.
All time. Historical. Young Bucks.
Uh,